Hey, so this is the Drunkalogs, a podcast about addiction and recovery in which each guest shares their version of how it was, what happened, and how it is now, and then endures a half-hour Q&A at the hands of your host, Nick Morton. My next guest had planned to fulfill his and his parents' dream of becoming a lawyer until a felony drug bust and a long chapter of drinking and using put that dream beyond his grasp. But in a classic case of God doing for you what you could not do for yourself, his daily commute from his parents' house to his job at a Toyota dealership took him past a comedy club, and from that chance exposure, a new dream and a new path was eventually revealed. He now hosts the Shindig Show, which can be seen regularly at the Comedy Store and clubs all over America, and you can catch his comedy on his special Walk of Shame, currently available on Amazon Prime. Won't you please welcome Jimmy Shin. Where'd you grow up?
I grew up in Tacoma, Washington.
Right. Wow.
Yeah, it's near Seattle.
Sure. As you look at your own story, like when do you feel like you're sort of like drinking and using really started?
I started drinking when I was 12 years old. My parents owned a liquor store, which probably shouldn't be a surprise since I'm Asian. And they were the ones behind the till, like, hurry up and buy! And I'm just a kid trying to fit in to American society, and it was tough because my parents and me were the stereotype. We were the Asian family that owned the liquor store on the corner. Right. And so it was kind of hard to fit in. And but what was cool about them opening up a liquor store is I found out that I could steal liquor and sell it at school.
Wow, that's amazing.
And so you'd be surprised how fast I became the cool guy.
Right, yeah.
It was totally. Like the very next day, they were like, Jimmy, what's up? The same people that did racial slurs now said, like, what's up to me? Like, and like, where the party at?
What was that first like deal, so to speak? How did that go down? Like how'd you put two and two together that you could?
I think I started, my friends would stay the night, we were about 12 years old. And then, we would steal candy and stuff like that. One night we decided to drink.
And did you guys live above like the store, or were you attached? So you'd sneak down into the store at night and kind of like have your own like private shopping spree. Yeah. Amazing.
Yeah, so we'd steal candy, get all whacked out on sugar, and that's probably my first addiction.
Right.
And then, then we used to steal liquor and drink it. And then
would you drink it right there in the store, or would you sneak it back upstairs? And
we would sneak it back upstairs. My parents would be sleeping, in the other room, and so I'd take it upstairs to my room.
What would you take, like beer? Usually?
Back then, man, it was like gross shit, like 40 ounces of Old English 800. You remember those? Mickey's Big Mouths. Now looking back, we had good liquor.
Right.
And I would steal like malt liquor and like just gross stuff. So I think maybe that's where my alcoholism started, because I didn't care what it tasted like.
Sure.
I just wanted to get messed up as fast as I could.
And how often would you guys do that? Like,
probably every weekend,
right?
Or every time my friends stayed the night. I didn't drink alone back then. I wasn't pathetic to start. But anytime, and one of my other, now thinking back, he's probably an alcoholic too, but he would stay the night, my friend Johnny, and we would steal, liquor all the time. And then we'd sneak out. And I remember even at like 13, like stealing the car, just hitting a tree, bringing the car back, my dad noticing the bump, and then just act, back, that's when my acting started. Just acting like I was oblivious to how that could have happened.
Right.
Like, oh, someone must have hit and ran,
Right. Yeah.
I was like a master actor. I could convince anybody of anything, back then. It was weird.
And so then, how does it kind of evolve from there? Like now you're like sneaking bottles out of the place and selling them in school and getting kind of popular, and like, does your partying kind of escalate?
It escalated pretty quickly. I liked the power of having the liquor and people coming up to you and wanting the liquor. So that evolved into drugs later. You know, I liked having the drugs. I liked selling the drugs. And I remember I was at this high school party. I was always afraid of cocaine just because, you know, you associate that with crack.
Yeah.
And you don't know that it's that much different than crack. Well, it really isn't, but, you know, it doesn't take you down as fast, I guess.
Sure.
But I remember my friend gave me a little key bump.
Right.
And he called it a G-snap.
Uh-huh.
And he said, do you want a G-snap? And I was like, wow, you know, I'll do a G-snap. That sounds gangster, right? So I take this little G-snap, and just to let our listeners know, that's still cocaine. Just because you give it a cool name doesn't mean that it's not. Chasing the Dragon is still heroin. And I take that G-snap, man, and I feel, you know, powerful. I feel confident. I'm walking around talking to everybody, just chatting it up. I loved it. It didn't kill me, you know. And so
I also was afraid of coke. I think the whole like Nancy Reagan say no to drugs thing really affected me, and like I didn't do coke until, and Len Bias, you know, having his heart explode on the basketball court, and I didn't really start doing it until college. And I just remember like being just like shocked by how sort of innocuous it was when I finally did it. I was like, this is awesome. Like, what's wrong with this? Like, this is just fun. Like, I'm talking more. I feel better. Like, I can stay up all night. I can drink more. Like,
so. And I hate to say it, it's hard to die from coke unless you have a heart problem. I've started so much blow. El Chapo sent me a fruit basket for Christmas, you know, and I still didn't have a heart attack. What's scary these days, honestly, is fentanyl.
Yeah.
You know, back in the day, we had drugs that really didn't kill you. You know what I'm saying? Let's face it. But these days, even cocaine can be laced with fentanyl.
It's so fucked up. You know, you're trying to do some coke, and you know, I guess you're doing coke and you feel sleepy. Call the paramedics because you've been given some fentanyl. And that was your first taste of cocaine, was that G-snap?
Yeah, that was my first taste, and I kid you not, maybe like just a week or two later, I was figuring out how to score an 8-ball, cutting it up, making it into 2 8-balls, and selling it.
And how did you score that first 8-ball? Who, you know, like where did you find the guy to sell that?
You know, you can sniff it out. I always say that, you know, when you're a drug addict or a coke addict, you have coke dar. And what I mean by that, it's like, you could go into a party with 200 people, right? And you'll find that one girl that's got a teener in her purse, you know, or you'll find a guy who's got it. You know, it's weird. I think we just attract each other.
Yeah.
No, you smell it on each other.
Yeah, you can see that energy, that like, I need to score kind of vibe. And then you're just like, there it is. It's amazing how easy it is. And so you buy an 8-ball, you cut it up, you sell it, and you're on, basically.
Yeah, back then it was like profitable because I was.
And how old are you at that point?
I always joke around and say, then I but really I was probably like 15, 16.
Right.
But just as a joke, I go, then I turned 13, you know, selling coke by 13, which would be funny. But I bet you there are people that sell coke by like 12, you know, in the hood though, probably like in Compton.
And were you like a good student still? I mean, and all that? Were you like living up to your parents' expectations?
Yeah, I was still a good student. I always tell the story. My dad always wanted me to be a lawyer.
Right.
And so he would put a vision board on my wall when I was a kid. And the vision board said, Jimmy S., attorney at law.
Oh my God, better call Saul.
Yeah. So it was kind of crazy. Like, he brainwashed me.
Right.
You know, since I was a child. And I would look at this thing and say, one day I'm going to be an attorney. And it worked. Wow. I got myself into law school. You know, I lived this double life. On one hand, I was partying and selling drugs. And on the other hand, I was a straight A student that, you know, got great SAT scores.
Right. And so how did high school evolve? You're like sort of dealing drugs. You're successful in school, or you're a popular kid, I assume. And like, are you doing comedy back then? I mean, is there
no, not even close.
Not even.
I just, you know, thought I wanted to be a lawyer. That's all I knew. You know, I didn't think that, you know, doing something I really loved was an option.
Right.
Because, you know, you're not taught that as a Asian kid. You're not taught that, maybe even in society. You know, they tell you to, you know, take the safe route, something that you're going to make money at. You know, we're not really encouraged unless you come from an artist family, I guess.
Yeah. Sure.
But we're not encouraged towards the arts. You know, it's just so uncertain, right?
Yeah. So, did you graduate high school, on time and stuff? And
yeah. It's good. Graduated high school, went to the University of Washington.
Nice.
I was still selling. By then I was selling ounces and Molly. I remember I went through a little rave period, when the raves came out, and I was selling at the raves, and I thought I'd found it, my community, people that like to do what I like to do. So it was, my escape, my community, and I really liked it.
And your business.
Yeah, and my business all in one, right?
And was your using just fun at that point? Is it still just it's all good?
So much fun.
Right.
Like, honestly, even today, I'm not going to sit here and say it was all bad.
Mm-hmm.
They were some of the best times of my life.
Sure.
Often people invite me to festivals and stuff like that, and I'm like, you know what? I've already had the best times of my life. You know what I mean? You can't go from having, the best drugs, the best time, being, behind the DJ booth,
Were you DJing?
What?
Were you DJing also?
I was also DJing, yeah.
Oh, wow. Nice.
Yeah, so I was like DJing for a while, and that was my artistic outlet, I guess, back then.
Right, sure.
And I loved music, and I loved, especially when you take Molly, music sounds so good.
Right.
And so, yeah, I really got into that scene.
And then you graduate, and did you go straight to law school, or do you take some time off between?
I think I took like a year off, and then.
And what'd you do? Did you work, or did you?
I think I was managing an apartment and studying for the LSATs. Right. I remember that, but I remember I went through a stint of being sober, kind of on my own. Maybe just smoking pot. Remember back then when that was sober? Like if you drank like a couple beers and smoked a little pot, you were like, oh man, I did so good last weekend. All I did was smoke weed and drink. I was good. That was like, my sober, you would still smoke pot, but,
and did you,
I didn't do the hard stuff.
And were you moderating because you were like trying to get serious about your life, or because you felt like it was getting out of control, or?
Us addicts all go through those cycles.
You
get sick of it, and, you try to quit, and you try to do willpower, and you try to do, a juice cleanse, you do it all,
Right.
But it doesn't really stick.
Juice cleanse, totally.
Yeah, and back then I always kind of wanted to be sober. I knew that I wasn't on the right path.
Yeah, sure.
We know that deep inside, right? Sure. But I just didn't have a solution. I didn't have a spiritual solution to my problem.
And so do you go to UW for law school as well?
I went to California Western, actually.
Right.
Down in San Diego. And shout out to any of my San Diego peeps. I loved it down there. It was great, but I, barely got by, I was still selling. And during that time, while I was going to law school, I got busted for selling large amounts of marijuana. Oh, right. And 7 DE agents came in, to my apartment, with guns, and I was arrested, and all my neighbors came out. They thought I was the studious Asian law student, and instead they got an episode of Cops.
And how much pot did you have, and how did they find you? Do you know?
Well, I was doing what was called like 100 packs.
Right.
People would bring 100 packs from up north to San Diego because you could sell it for a lot more because all they had was Mexican weed.
Right.
And so, I would flip it, probably double my money, you know? And, when they had arrived, I only had this big bowling ball of shake left.
Right.
From all the pounds that I had slaying already.
Right.
And so I didn't really have any pounds. I had just, distributed it all.
Yeah.
And all that was left was all the shake that people didn't want over the course of the, and I didn't do it for that long. Right. In that crazy amount. Right. I was busted at that time, for a reason. Cause I think that, I was still not, selling the crazy stuff.
Right. Right.
Like 25 to life or something. You know what I mean? Like powder or coke or
And
mall.
what are the consequences for a bust like that?
But even back then, it wasn't, as serious.
Yeah, sure.
It was illegal. It was a lot more serious than it is now, and it was a felony. So that was the problem more than anything. I went to jail for a couple days.
How was that?
It was very eye-opening. But even when I got out of jail, I promised myself that I wouldn't, do drugs anymore. I was looking in the carpet for drugs. I was looking. I was calling my friend to come get me high. It was that out of control. I couldn't stop even after going to jail.
And were you using during the sort of like the all the legal process leading up to your eventual, sentencing?
Well, back then I remember I would take Xanax,
right?
Just to chill out, and so I wouldn't freak out. And the biggest thing when you try to stop drugs or alcohol for that matter, it's the anxiety.
Yeah.
So I knew how to take breaks, and I would, what I call sort of cycle drugs. You know what I'm saying? So I would do, a bunch of coke for a while, with pot. Then I would do Xanax for a while, then do Percocets for a while. You know what I'm saying? And so
like I was always trying to sort of like orchestrate what I called the soft landing. I would like party really hard on the weekend, and then like, Sunday night I'd be like, okay, if I like, smoke some pot and just like have one martini, maybe I can like ease into sleep, and then Monday I'll be okay again. Though I was never really worked. Were you able to finish law school or?
I was. I basically told the dean that I was an addict.
Right.
And, I don't want to say that I hustled her.
Right.
Because I think I did believe that I wanted to, do it back then. Yeah. But I just didn't know how. I didn't have a spiritual solution.
What year in law school were you when you were busted?
Third year.
So you could kind of go through the legal loopholes and
so what they say in law school, the first year they scare the shit out of you. The second year they work the shit out of you, and third year they bore the shit out of you.
Right.
And so, in the third year I had a little extra time apparently to pursue other endeavors.
Right.
And I remember the grandiosity of it all. I was so, caught up in everything. I thought that I was going to be like a Scarface / like Johnny Cochran or something, and build this practice with drug money.
Right. Right.
Just delusions, of grandeur.
And so did you graduate before you served your sentence, or did you have to serve your sentence and then graduate?
What was weird is I think when I got busted, they called my fucking school.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, they called my school. And I remember now that I think about it, I remember they called me in.
Right.
Said, what the hell is going on?
Right. That's next level trouble.
Yeah. And so, I start crying, even then.
Sure.
And plus it was just it was a devastating blow,
How did your parents take it?
My parents were devastated.
Right.
Here they are. They thought that I was going to law school. They were paying for law school.
Yeah, you're fulfilling their dream.
Their whole life, to come over here. They're immigrants to send me to law school.
Where did they come from?
South Korea.
Right.
Yeah, I specify South because some smart asses, I'll go Korea. They go North or South.
Right.
Well, dumbass, I wouldn't even be here if it was from the North.
You don't get here from the North Korea.
Yeah. Yeah, you barely live when you're from the North.
And so you get out and you're still using drugs. And what's the plan? What are you thinking?
I'm thinking I'm trying to get sober.
Right.
But even then, you would just forget. I always say that we have a disease of amnesia.
Sure. Totally.
And denial, right?
Yeah.
So we forget, and we're in denial of how serious our predicament is. You could literally be at the edge of death and think that you could somehow get away with one more.
Totally. And do you try to like go to meetings, or do you at that point, or are you just kind of
at that point? I remember I was designated to outpatient treatment. That was my first exposure to treatment,
right,
and the program. So I do give that credit that it exposed me and planted some seeds to the program. I was nowhere near ready.
Right.
You know, I remember one time at the outpatient, someone told me to dip my finger in chlorine before I pee in front of the PO, because I would have to call every day and see if my color would pop to go do a urinalysis. And so the next time I'm in front of the PO, I'm peeing on my finger. The pee's going everywhere. And just to let our listeners know, that doesn't work.
was your PO like, I know this trick, dude?
Yeah. No, he actually didn't see the pee
Right.
going everywhere. It just came out diluted.
Right.
You know, he wasn't looking that hard. You know what I mean? He just kind of looked, you know, just in the
giving
room.
You a little privacy.
You didn't, yeah.
And is part of the terms of your parole is that you not use?
Of course it was.
Right.
Yeah, of course it was. Yeah. So basically, I was on probation, and if I broke any rules, which is to not use any substances,
right,
that I would go to prison. Sure. And so I was dealing with a prison sentence, and I still couldn't stop. That's how baffling.
That's terrifying. And how long does that go on for?
Oh, man. And it was, I got to tell you, the worst time that you can party, you know, knowing that you have to take this P test, you know, maybe Monday. You don't know what day it is. And they do that purposefully, right? So that you, you know, can't have any fun. And so you're on the internet looking at how long alcohol's in your system, how long Percocet. You know, I became like a freaking, you know, a doctor in how long shit stays in your system.
And can you? Are there ways? There are ways to clear your system out, right? Or not really?
There are, but you know they're not consistent. You know, another thing that I tried is those pills, those herbal pills.
Right.
They sell at those GNC. It's called Clean UA with a little elf that jumps in the air. You know, that's on the front, and you take about 20 of those pills and drink a gallon of water, and that comes out diluted too.
Right.
And so it's not foolproof.
And did you ever get busted during that period?
Yeah, every time.
Really?
A single, you know, clean UA.
And what would they say?
They would just go, well, sometimes it would just come out diluted.
So
they knew that I was trying to play the system.
Right.
You know, this isn't their first rodeo.
Right.
And so finally what the PO said was, look, you're not able to get sober.
Right.
So you need help. And so that's a inpatient treatment. You know, so they gave me a choice to either do inpatient treatment or go to prison. And so I said, I'll take inpatient treatment. And
so, and where did you go? How long were you there?
It's called Sundowners. It's in Eastern Washington. And I went, are you familiar with Sundowners?
I'm only laughing because like when my wife and I, right before we had kids, we went to Africa on safari. And like every night in Africa, you have sundowners, and it's what they call cocktails. Sort of an ironic name for a recovery.
Yeah, that is funny. Yeah, they even have a meeting here in LA.
Yeah, that's right. They do. They have sundowners. It's like Sunday nights at the hospital, right? Or something like that. Yeah.
Yeah, well, lately on Zoom, but yeah.
Right. So, and how long are you at Sundowners?
I think it was a 21 day.
And were you into it?
You know, not really.
Right.
Because I remember one of the patients really, not patients, one of the counselors really liked me. And she took me aside and went, you know what? You got your whole life ahead of you.
Right.
And she actually got emotional, I remember, because she saw that I wasn't going to stay sober.
Right.
They can tell. You know?
Of course.
They for whatever reason, they could read your mind. You know, just like we kind of can when someone's not serious.
Yeah.
And I thought I was kind of serious, but she apparently knew.
Oh, amazing.
And she was like, you know what? You should really, you know, try to do this, you know, and she's got emotional, you know?
Yeah. And but you get out and you don't stay sober.
I did not stay sober. I lasted a month maybe.
Right, that's pretty good.
You know? Yeah, not bad.
It's a start.
And one night I just, you know, was off to the races again. Did everything too.
And how long did that stint last?
I don't even remember.
20 years.
But I remember.
How long are you even sober? I didn't even ask.
I'm 6 next month in June.
6 next month.
21st.
And how old are you now?
I'm 43.
43. So, all right, yeah. So you're 37 when you get sober, huh?
Yeah.
And so like what happens between then you're getting sober and getting out of rehab? Like what's your life and evolving?
Play the game, you know, and I end up overdosing in a strip club while I'm getting a lap dance.
And what are you ODing on?
I'm ODing on GHB, Valium, alcohol, which you should never do together. Those three are like depressants. And I'm lucky to even be alive. I remember waking up in the hospital with a tube down my throat, a tube down something else that really hurts. And the doctor comes in and he's like, you know what? You're really lucky to be alive, because I was choking on my own puke. And he said that he had seen many people pass like that.
And so, what part of the world are you in at that point?
This is Seattle.
Seattle. You know? And have you evolved into a comedian at that point?
No, not at all. Not yet. Basically, what ended up happening is I OD'd. 3 days later, I was out drinking and doing coke again.
Wow.
And, you know, I went on a 3-day binge because I didn't want to come down and face myself and know how basically insane I was. And maybe suicidal, you know? And
sure,
so,
yeah,
you know,
clearly.
I came down, I remember curling up in a little ball and saying the most sincere prayer I've ever said in my life. And that's, God, please help me.
Yeah.
You know, God, please help me. And I'm not going to say I had a spiritual experience or anything, but something shifted inside of me.
Sure.
You know, I think I in that moment, I gave my will and my life to God as I understood him.
Sure.
You know, of course I take it back and take back my will, but in that moment is what matters, you know? And yeah, my life really hasn't been the same since that shift.
And what,
I was given a shift in perception.
And what did you do in the wake of that shift? Like, what was your first step towards like getting well?
The first step towards getting well back then, you know, believe it or not, I was still selling.
Right.
I was having other people do the dirty work and just, you know, getting envelopes. And I remember I removed myself from that place and just moved out.
Right.
You know, just moved out like the next day. You know, I didn't.
And had you been doing any lawyering at that point?
No, not at all.
Had you ever done? Did you ever do any lawyering after you graduated from law school?
No. Okay. No, not at all. I hated it. You know what I mean? And
totally.
You know, I think that it was a part of my, you know, acceleration of the disease. Is that was my escape. You know, doing drugs and alcohol was my only comfort.
I mean, it's just like interesting to have this like this dream imposed on you by your family and then actually like executing it against every fiber in your being and then having to sort of live with the reality that like it's not what you want. Like as much as you think it's what you want, it's not what you want. I'm sure there's got to be like a lot of like self-hatred and shame and, you know, just
I was living as they say, a life of quiet desperation.
Yeah, sure.
You know, where you just didn't like your life, and you know, you get to a point where is this what life is all about? Is doing something you hate doing and paying your bills and you know what I mean? And having a family and not what it's about. Like this is stupid. You know what I mean?
Right. And so you remove yourself from that house and then what happens?
And then I move in with my parents in Tacoma.
And are they still above the liquor store or near the liquor store? No.
You know, my dad's working at Boeing at that point, and you know, I move in to my childhood room. You know, on the wall is still the vision board that says Jimmy S. Attorney at Law.
Way.
So I think I still want to be an attorney.
Oh my God.
You know, or I think I'm doing. You know, I have to be an attorney.
Right. What choice do you have? Sure.
Right. I have this law degree. You know.
And you're back in their house.
Yeah, I've spent 7 years of college of you know
their money.
Money and time and energy and soul and everything, right? And so I think I still want to do it, you know. And so, you know, I'm sober at this point. But during that time, one thing interesting is we lived blocks away from this comedy place called the Tacoma Comedy Underground.
Uh-huh.
And I remember just driving by it all the time or walking by it all the time and, wanting to do it because deep inside, I've always wanted to try it, but I just never had the balls.
Yeah.
It's a pretty, crazy thing to get up there for the first time and try to make people laugh. It's not, sort of a easy thing to do.
No, it's crazy. It's completely crazy.
Yeah.
And yeah, so keep going.
And so I'll go with the first open mic story. That's when I was still on probation. I'm living with my parents. I'm depressed. My friend takes me to this open mic. I watched the first time,
Right.
I'm like, I can fucking do this. And thank God there was some people that were really bad.
Right.
Because I thought to myself I could do better than them. And that's what sort of was my motivation is I was better than a couple of the people. And so, but come to find out I really wasn't. They were just dude like me. And but my first time, I just remember the feeling that I felt. I don't barely remember the jokes I told, but it was the way that it made me feel.
Sure.
It made me feel for the first time that I was doing something that I really liked.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like I like DJing and I like making people dance, but making people laugh and off of something that you had wrote.
Yeah.
It was just it's a whole different experience. Nick.
Yeah, no, it's
when was your first experience?
It's funny. It came after sobriety for me too. I got sober and I was working on a film called Fat Kid Rules the World up in Seattle, actually. And there were a lot of funny people involved in that movie. No stand-ups, but funny people. And I'd hang out with them every night. And, I was 6 weeks sober and I was trying to I was having this awakening. And I was like, when I said to myself, when I get back to LA, I'm going to do something funny. Like I'm going to do something in comedy. And the funny people on set were like, you really should. And, and then I took a class. I took this class with Jerry Katzman and nobody in that class thought I was very funny. And then at the end of the class, you do a showcase and I did the showcase and I was just like, I've never felt anything like that before in my life. It was so magical and so it was, I'd been reading, as I'd been studying comedy, I'd been reading other comedians' stories and I just kept wondering, I remember Patton Oswalt telling this story on Twitter about trying to work out a joke and how when he finally made it work, the audience's reaction. And there had been this one joke that I had been working on for, every week for, timing tailored a different way every time. And I just couldn't nail it. And that night I nailed it. And I was like, it was such a revelation.
Yeah.
And it's funny.
Did you even sleep that night? I remember the first night I couldn't even sleep.
There were definitely, I don't remember that night. I remember going out afterwards with the other comedians and being totally high. And, my wife for, years afterwards, every time I performed, I couldn't sleep. She would be like, get out, you have to get out of bed and just go downstairs and work this off. You smell weird and you're too keyed up. But, it's funny because when you were saying earlier that you were talking about DJing and doing Molly and the experience of being at festivals when you were young. And I remember talking to Tamer Katan. I'm sure you know Tamer, right?
He's a very good friend of mine.
And he was saying we were talking about just what a thrill it is to perform and how in so many ways it's better than any time in our lives, whether that was high school or college or, the quote unquote glory days, to be able to experience that level of kind of energy and aliveness at that point in your life is just it's a
well for me what it was, I always say it's like doing a line of pure uncut, the best coke you've ever done,
totally,
except there's no negative consequence.
Yeah exactly.
To be honest with you, I wasn't sick of being high. I was just sick of the consequences.
You
know what I mean? I like getting high. I like being drunk,
right?
And then now finally I found a thrill that wouldn't land me in jail.
Yeah.
you know?
And so when you're living at home, you're driving by this comedy store, you start doing some open mics. Are you working? Do you have a job at that point?
Back then, yeah, I'm selling cars
Right.
at Toyota Tacoma during the day. So I would bring my, employees,
Right,
coworkers
sure.
to the show and, and shit like that. So that's where it got started. I was more into that than anything.
And are you going to meetings too? Like
going to meetings, I still think I want to be a lawyer at this
right.
point because of the vision board on my
Right.
wall, and so I'm, gathering signatures.
What do you need signatures for?
For AA meetings to show the bar association that it's called the ABA.
Right.
Basically, it's the Bar Association Character and Fitness Committee, and they determine whether you are fit enough
to be reinstated,
to be instated,
right,
in the first place,
right?
Because I was never got my law license,
right?
And so basically, I went in front of the Bar Association, and basically had this stack of signatures, a notebook of AA meetings. These letters from my pastor, all these people of importance, I've been praying, I'm going to church, doing everything right. And they said no.
How long had you been sober at that point?
At that point, I'd been sober a few years,
and they said no.
like a couple of years.
Wow.
But but what it was, I had a felony.
Right.
I had a felony. And so they thought that, I don't know what it was, but they made the right choice.
Right.
Because had they said yes, I probably would have been a lawyer still. I wouldn't be talking to you right now.
Right. Yeah.
I wouldn't be in LA, doing what I love for a living, doing it with all my friends.
Right. Amazing.
Traveling the country, I just wouldn't be doing that.
Sure. And so then what happens? Were you devastated at the time?
I was devastated. It caused me to relapse.
Oh, really? Wow.
Yeah. It caused me to relapse. And, I was just so mad, everything that I understood or I thought I understood about, how to achieve something, I guess, had been shattered. So I got a great change in perception. And basically, I started going deep into comedy.
And how long were you out for?
I was out for about 3 years.
Wow, really?
Yeah. But I was also doing comedy.
Right.
And, I got to say, sometimes, when you're fucked up and doing comedy, it's either one or the other. You're either,
right.
Killing it on a level that, it's hard to repeat, or you're bombing and you're slurring your words and you're doing something fucked up to the producer or making fun of the wrong people and you're getting kicked off of shows and you know what I mean? Getting in fight with hecklers and fucking, you know what I mean? So I did experience that. So thank God I don't have to wonder what it's like.
Yeah.
To be one of those rock and roll fucking comedians. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I did it. I do a fucking line, and say that I did it. Right. I just got done doing a line and people would be cheering and laughing.
Right, of course, because that's what they're doing.
Yeah, that's what they're doing. And so it was like very relatable material, but at the same time it was very, dangerous and thank God I was able to, get sober again.
What brought you back in?
One of the things that I always like to say to people that are newcomers, one of the things that saved me is someone told me in the program that you don't have to go to the way bottom like you did before. You don't have to, OD. You don't have to go to jail. You don't have to be homeless. You can raise your bottom. And so I remember I heard that. So I still had a job. You know what I mean? I still had, a roof over my head. I wasn't catching another case at this point. I had, successfully completed probation.
Right.
And on my way to getting, my case expunged.
Right. Sure.
So, it wasn't that bad, but then again, it wasn't that good.
Sure.
You know what I mean? And I knew where this was going because of, what I learned in the program. So I played the whole record through, as they say, and I knew how this story was going to end. and it was going to end in jails, institutions, or death.
Right.
And so I made a conscious decision just to come back. You know what? I'm going to raise my bottom.
And were you in LA at that point, or were you in Seattle still?
Not yet. I was in Seattle. I've been in LA for about 10 years.
Right.
So I even had a stint in LA.
Right.
You know,
sure.
where I had a hiccup.
Yeah.
And I had maybe 4 years here.
Right.
No, 3.5 maybe. And then went out and then came back. And now I have almost 6.
And what ultimately brought you down to LA? Just like wanting to be a part of the scene here?
Well, when I first came down, I was sober. And
Right.
I moved into a sober living because I knew that I was scared of LA. You know, you don't come to LA to get away from drugs.
And how long had you been sober when you came down to LA?
When I came down to LA, I was like maybe a year. My sponsor said, make sure and have a year before you make any big moves.
Right.
And so, came down here, and then I was sober, while I was in the sober living.
Right.
And I remember, I was probably the longest, and I was like the leader of the sober living because I had more sobriety than everybody else.
Right. Sure.
Finally, they were like, when are you going to like move out on your own? And,
Right.
I was like, 2.5 years in there, you know what I mean?
Really? Wow.
But I was smart, I knew that I was scared. And sure enough, 6 months after I moved out from sober living, I did relapse.
Right.
So I should have stayed there longer. Those bastards should have let me stay.
And when you relapsed, was it just booze, or was it the whole thing again?
It was everything.
Yeah, of course.
We go back to where we were.
Totally.
It gets worse, never better. And it just while I was sober, my disease was doing push-ups.
Yeah, totally.
And honestly, I was really bad the last time.
Right.
Like where I was doing oxys, I was doing coke, doing it by myself, just all kinds of crazy shit.
And how'd you pull out of that nosedive?
Again, I didn't hit rock bottom. Well, I did have an eviction notice on my door. And I had a car that didn't run, and I knew this was going, again, I knew where this was going. I remember the last night that I was out, I had a bunch of coke and I was doing it by myself. I couldn't even leave my apartment because I was so paranoid and sketched out. You know how you get when you're like on the second day of coke, and you hadn't eaten, and there's no, I remember there was no alcohol left, so I would pour together all the empty beer cans and make it into one gross fucking glass of beer, like college, like
totally.
And I would drink that, and then I couldn't even walk to the store, which was a block away, because I was so sketched out, afraid that someone would know or see me, or you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Which is ridiculous because nobody would be even out at 6 a.m. Or 5 a.m.
Right.
And then I would smoke these, cigarette butts on my patio, just sketched out. And I remember I tried to hide the coke from myself. I just put it in a drawer, which had no lock on it. So the whole time you're just thinking, I'm not going to do it. I'm not going to do it. I'm not going to do that coke that's in that drawer. But you think about it the whole time, and then you can only last like 10 minutes.
Totally.
And then you do that, and then my heart's just beating fast and thinking, I'm going to get a heart attack. And then I remember watching the news, and during that time, remember that when that guy from Glee died in a motel room from an overdose?
Yeah.
I forget his name, but he died.
Was it Corey Moncrief? Was that? I can't remember.
Exactly.
There were two. There was one that was a pedophile that hung himself, and then there was one that OD'd. But anyway.
Yeah. So basically saw that on the news, and I was, at that point thinking I'm going to have a heart attack because I'm just doing line after line of this blow with no beer left, and no, nothing to bring me down, So I'm just like, just praying like,
that's going to be me.
God help me.
Yeah.
And and then at least I knew what to do. I knew to come back.
Right.
Come back into the rooms.
Did you call someone to be like, I need help, or did you just go back in yourself?
I went to the log cabin the very next day.
Right.
Of
course.
I went to the log cabin the very next day. I knew there was going to be a meeting there.
Sure.
Went to the 1 o'clock. And yeah, I remember I got a sponsor that day. Yeah.
Right. Nice.
Yeah.
Is this the longest you've been sober now that you're?
This is the longest I've been sober.
And does it feel different this time? I mean, do you feel like, does it make more sense?
It does. It does. It really does. Yeah. I just feel happy,
Yeah.
and joyous and free. I've, worked the steps. I have
And how has it affected your comedy career, would you say, being sober?
Well, thank God that I learned stand-up sober.
Right.
There's those people that can't do it without smoking weed or drinking a couple drinks or something. Right.
Yeah.
So I knew how to do it sober.
Right.
So I thank God for that. Otherwise, I might be still out there.
Yeah. Or you just never get the nerve to go back on stage again.
So I just got right back on.
Go on stage and then you fucking crash and burn, and you're like, that's so traumatizing that God only knows what happens.
Yeah, and then when you first get sober, as you well know, Nick, you kind of get gifts from the universe. You get some things that open up to let you know that you're on the right path.
Sure.
Right, and one of mine was I became a producer at the Comedy Store.
Oh, wow.
And this was like 6 years ago. And back then, it was sort of a ghost town.
Yeah. I mean, that's when I started, and it was it was.
Yeah, even on a Friday night in the main room, there was like 80 people there.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah,
it wouldn't be sold out all the time.
Yeah.
But these days, right before we closed everything, there was, not a night that it wasn't full.
No, I know. And it was, as someone starting out, it was kind of a mixed blessing, because it was like, it was a place you could get stage time. It was a good place to get stage time. I mean, even though they were bringer shows, it was still like a good audience, and it felt exciting to be there,
Yeah.
Yeah, that's interesting. And
so I, got an opportunity that might not have got if, it was like today.
Right.
So I, they were saying, hey, you want a show in the belly room? You know what I mean? And,
right.
Sure. And then I used to be a, promoter of clubs and DJ. Yeah. And I remember in the beginning, it was slow, some nights it would be full. Some nights, even in the belly room, would be half full.
Right.
And then, I just kept going with it, built up an audience. And I remember back then I was driving Uber, and I would meet people, during the day. And back then it was like kind of where people didn't know how to act when they got in your car, Totally. So they would be extra nice. Nowadays they're
now they're just like whatever.
Yeah. But back then they would sit in the front seat, no lie, and they would be your best friend. We'd listen to music, you'd drive them around, and and it would be a ton of fun. Yeah. And I'd get their phone numbers because they'd realize I was a comedian. I'd go, hey, I have a show this Friday. I'll get you free tickets for.
Sure. Yeah.
And so I get their number. I still, to this day, under Uber, have like a group of people that come out to my shows.
That's amazing.
And I'm still friends with some of them.
You still do that show, right?
I still do that show.
What's it called again?
It's called the Shindig Show. It's now expanded to all the Levity Lives and Improvs.
Right.
So I've taken it, one of my goals for last year was to produce a Shindig Show in all the Levity Live and Improv in California. And there's a lot of them.
Yeah,
so I was able
totally.
to do that. And it was pretty cool.
That's amazing. Well, Jimmy, I know you have to go, so I think this feels like a good place to end it. It's amazing. It's an amazing story. It's got so many interesting sort of chapters, and it's great to see you doing so well. I love doing that show with you last month, and hopefully we'll someday live comedy will come back to this world. I'm looking forward to it.
It will.
Yeah.
It's just a matter of time. The way I look at it, this is just a reset. I'm using this time to work on a book. I'm using this time to get closer to my higher power, and I'm taking a lot of downtime. I've been, going to the, like this Laurel Canyon hike that I do, and it's been really, really, really peaceful.
Oh, that's amazing. Well, cool. Well, thank you so much for being on the show, and I'll talk to you soon, I hope.
Sounds great.
Hey, so if you've been enjoying this podcast, you can head over to my Patreon page and feel completely free to support the show with a modest contribution at www.patreon.com/thedrunkalogs. Drunkalogues cover art is designed and created by John DeManil, and the Drunkalogues theme song is composed and performed by Stephen Stout. I am Nick Morton.